Hello everybody, welcome back to another celebrity face reading. My name is Taylor and today we will be looking at none other than current and longest serving Israeli Prime Minister, King of America, wanted war criminal, and genuinely really good contender for the Antichrist. I think it's either him or Mr. Beast. You know him, you love him, you hate him, Benjamin Netanyahu. Now this guy is of course all over the news pretty much at any given time. This is going to be a pretty evergreen video for the foreseeable future. This guy has of course been in the news a ton recently, and by recently I mean the past 5, 10, 20 years. This guy seemingly cannot stand out of the spotlight, and that is because he is a harsh and highly effective leader. Under his leadership, Israel seems to be unstoppable. They can bomb any country they want, they can assassinate anyone they want, and the most powerful country in the world, the United States, is totally wrapped around this guy's finger, as is its supposed leader, Donald Trump, who seems to also be totally under this guy's control. And notice how I keep saying this guy, because I don't think this is just Israel doing all this. I think it's this guy. There's something about this guy's face, his personality, his being that is extremely intense, powerful, competitive, and controlling. Something that has given him a special edge in politics and in war. Today, I'm going to dig deep into Netanyahu's physiognomy, try to explain why he's so effective as a leader, why he does the things that he does, what his motivations are, and if there's any potential weaknesses or secrets that he might be hiding there. Before we get into it, I just want to remind you to like, subscribe, all of that. Check out my website if you want to learn more about this or get a face reading done for yourself or someone you know. Also, check out my Patreon where I upload bonus videos that teach you tutorials on how to do physiognomy for yourself and study people in your own life. And without any further ado, let's get right into it. Now we're going to start off with his phenotype, which is the physical expression of his ancestry, heritage, and race. Now right off the bat, a very notable thing about Netanyahu is that he does not have the stereotypical Jewish look. He doesn't look particularly Middle Eastern or Semitic or Levantine or any of that. What he looks like is very Eastern European, much like Jeffrey Epstein, whom I covered as well. This is because both of these gentlemen are Ashkenazi Jews. They are Jews from Eastern Europe, from the Pale of Settlement, Russia, Ukraine, Poland, these areas. These guys and their ancestors have not been in the Middle East for about 2,000 years, and it shows. But I think he has a different phenotype from Jeffrey Epstein. He doesn't have that robust, pre-Slavic, bear Jew phenotype that I identified in that video. He has a different sort of look that is nonetheless very distinctly Eastern European. But it's ambiguous. It's hard to tell what type he exactly is, especially with his advanced age. So let's break down his characteristics. First off, with his cephalic index, clearly brachycephalic. You can look at his side profile and his head compared. He has got a broad and short skull with a flat occiput on the back. You can also notice in his side profile, he is high-skulled or hypsocranic as well. And if we turn back to his face, we can see that he has rather coarse, robust, very bulbous sort of facial features, especially with that long, straight, bulbous nose. A large and prominent nose, to be sure, but absolutely not a stereotypical Jewish nose or even a broadly Semitic nose. Lastly, you can notice in his eyes and eyebrows, and especially in pictures from his youth, he has pale skin, but he has rather dark hair and eyes. Now, with all these features taken into account, especially the pigmentation and the skeletal metrics, the shape of his skull and his height, I think that he is mostly Denarid. This is a very common and widespread continental European type, especially in the Balkans, but also found throughout Central Europe, especially in the Carpathian Mountains. The reason why his look is so distinct and kind of odd is because he's Carpathian mixed with Ponted. Ponted is a Mediterranean subtype found throughout the Black Sea and up into parts of Ukraine, Poland, etc., all throughout there and into the Balkans. So if I had to guess, his ancestors probably came from somewhere in Ukraine. And I will admit that there is a little bit of a Jewish look to him. If you look at the eyes, the nose, there's some very subtle Assyroid traits as well, kind of that Armenoid variant that's quite typical of Jews, comes out of Mesopotamia from the Babylonian exile and all that. So that's there as well. Alright, with his phenotype out of the way, we can finally get into his physiognomy and personality. We're going to start off with his side profile, which will tell us about his temperament and inborn characteristics. Now, as you can see from his youth, he started out as a quite choleric person. This means that he was willful, bossy, commanding, thought, planned, and acted in the long term, very kind of unsensitive seeming, very focused on work. A positive pessimist who very acutely saw and identified all the problems of the world, but instead of being discouraged by this, he was actually encouraged to take action to solve these problems. But nowadays, he is not choleric. While his forehead and chin are the same, his jawline has changed significantly. He got kind of fat around there. That is a sign of a transition from a choleric temperament to a more phlegmatic temperament. What does this mean? Well, it means that he is still willful, bossy, and commanding, but his energy is a lot less intense. Cholerics are long-term people in the sense of an Energizer bunny. They just keep going and going and going and never stop. They have very little need for sleep. Phlegmatics are the same, but they're much more slow and steady, much more subtle, tolerant, enduring. They can take a lot. Whereas a choleric's energy is more like a machine gun, phlegmatic's energy is more like that of a tank. They're very powerful themselves and they can do offense well, but their strong suit is in defense. It is in endurance and going for the long term. And we see that as the longest serving prime minister of Israel, he very much is a long-term person. And phlegmatics are also visionaries. They think and really dream out in the long term, more so than cholerics, who more sort of plan for the long term, if you can understand that difference there. They tend to be highly religious and very much committed to these broad systems of thought and philosophy. And you can see that Netanyahu seems to believe that. He seems to believe that he has some sort of grand destiny as the savior of Israel and the Jewish people, which is why he's taking these radical actions. And thanks to his choleric phlegmatic temperament, he's able to carry out these plans over the long term. He'll tell America that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, that they need to invade Iraq, because he can see that in 10, 15, 20 years, it's going to pay off for him and for his country. I kind of wish my country had leaders who could think this far in the future, honestly. I'm kind of jealous. Now, with the side profile and temperament out of the way, we're going to get into his face shape, which will tell us about his personality archetype and the broad strokes of his personality. Now, we can see in his youth, he had very much a triangular face and tapering down to that pointed chin. That is the Mercury face shape. It stands for the sensitive magician archetype. This means that he was, of course, sensitive, a little neurotic, reactive, very much attention-seeking, sought validation from external adulation and attention, approval. But you'll notice that he doesn't keep this sensitive, witty, quick-thinking personality very long. By the time he's hitting the stride of his career in adulthood and into middle age, he very quickly assumes the face shape that he still has to this day, which is the Mars face shape. This stands for the active warrior archetype. This signals a person and a personality that has a very strong impulse to fight and in some cases to kill. They feel very strongly. They love and hate with equal intensity. If you're on their good side, they're going to love you, shower you with gifts, be super generous, super fun, super charismatic. But if you get in their wrong side, they're going to want to kill you. And in this guy's case, he might actually kill you. Now, thanks to this pugnacious nature, this impulsivity, this risk-taking attitude, this willingness to fight for what they believe in or what they want, Mars-face people are highly overrepresented among the upper echelons of world leadership. You can look at Donald Trump, Elon Musk, even an enemy of Netanyahu, someone like Nicholas Fuentes, a very prominent commentator with very bold, out-there takes. And we certainly see this boldness in spades when it comes to Netanyahu. Alright, with his temperament and face shape, the broad strokes of his personality out of the way, we're now going to fill in some of the details here by going through a few of his most significant facial features and trying to figure out how they connect to his personality and how they have helped or harmed him during his political journey. Now, we're going to start off with what I think is probably his most significant feature, his wide-splayed ears. Those things are huge. In face reading, wide-splayed ears like that stand for independence and nonconformity, someone who marches to the beat of their own drum. You can think of another political leader that Netanyahu was often at odds with, Barack Obama, another politician who was very bold, ambitious, independent, had his own vision, very much not like a Joe Biden kind of figure who's more of just a conformist and an establishmentarian. And we can see that Netanyahu is all about himself. He will work ruthlessly to keep his coalition in power and keep himself in power and keep himself out of jail. And we can see that under his leadership, Israel has assumed this aspect of his personality as a whole. Israel has become as independent as Netanyahu is, even though they're still ultimately dependent on American taxpayer dollars, weapons, and soldiers in order to continue their reign of terror throughout the Middle East and elsewhere. Israel continues to abide no rules. There are no international laws or treaties that they respect. There are no borders or allyships that mean anything to them. If you're a close U.S. ally and host the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East, like, I don't know, Qatar, Israel will just bomb you. And they won't care. And I think that's because Netanyahu's very independent, bold, rebellious style of leadership has trickled down throughout the rest of Israeli society. Or, if you want to be a little more harsh, you might say that Israeli society as a whole is like that, which is why they elected Netanyahu. But just like how Netanyahu's ears are kind of freakishly wide-splayed, they're not just regular wide-splayed, they're very wide-splayed, he is freakishly independent, and this may end up being to a reckless degree. Ultimately, his policies, his boldness, his extremist form of revisionist Zionism may end up being bad for Israel and bad for Israelis in the long term. I mean, the only other state that I can think to compare Israel to in terms of being this isolated rogue garrison state is something like North Korea, which is not a place you want to be in. Adding on to this bold streak of Netanyahu's, you've got his next most prominent facial feature that I've always noticed, which are his sharply arched eyebrows. They're almost perfect triangles on there. He's actually my go-to example for arched eyebrows whenever I discuss this in face reading. These bad boys mean that his decision-making process is very competitive, controlling, and jealous. Ultimately, he wants to be in charge, and that's the main deciding factor whenever he's trying to make a choice. It's not based on logic, it's not based on consensus, it's based on what puts him at the top of the pyramid, at the top of the pecking order. The last of these very prominent bold traits of his is his positive canthal tilt. It's subtle because his eyes are so deep set, but it's there. This means quite directly that he puts his own interests over those of others, whether they be people in other countries or, from the way I see it, even fellow Israelis or Jews. He is confident, rebellious, aggressive, assertive. If you're trying to put him on trial, if you're trying to bring him to justice, put him to account, he's just not going to show up. He'll just make another excuse to not be there. He'll start whole wars to not have to go to court because he doesn't want to. And if Netanyahu doesn't want to, he doesn't have to. Now let's pivot a bit here from his very aggressive and bold features to another aspect of his personality that I think is very significant, especially to his political machinations and his career as a politician and as a world leader and as someone very involved in intrigue, secret plans, surprise attacks, all this stuff. His very deep-set eyes and his very thin upper lip. Now, his deep-set eyes mean that he is very calculating and reserved. He always thinks before he speaks. He's quite withdrawn, and overall just a scheming, planning sort of guy. I know, cool it with the anti-Semitic remarks, but I'm just talking about one individual here. The thin upper lip, meanwhile, shows that he is very hesitant to express what he truly thinks and feels deep down. So that means that even with that slightly wide mouth, he may be talking a lot, he may be a good talker, a very talkative person. What he's telling you is usually not going to be what he's really thinking or feeling. He's a very calculated speaker. And so this has helped him immensely with his career. He's able to tell the Israelis what they want to hear, the radical ultra-Orthodox what they want to hear, the settlers what they want to hear, the Europeans what they want to hear. He is able to march to America, go up to Congress, tell them about whatever he thinks they want to hear, and they will continue to applaud him 300 times a minute. And this is because, like any good, effective politician, he just lies. A ton. And he's good at it. Hey, don't hate the player, hate the game. Now, all you low IQ anti-Semites in the audience might be thinking, typical Jew being all sneaky, all right? But let's talk about one of his features that's very atypical of a Jewish person, his long and straight nose. Now, like I said previously, this is an Eastern European trait. This is a Denard trait. Now, that long nose, of course, means that he's very thoughtful, patient, contemplative. Again, he plays the long game. He's very good at concocting and carrying out these very long-term world-spanning plots to reshape the world to his whims. But unlike the stereotypical Armenoid Jewish nose, his nose is very straight, not curved at all. This means that he is a rational, level-headed thinker, whereas other people of his tribe might be driven more by deep passions, emotions. Think a lot of Jewish comedians, actors, poets. He is stone-cold steady. He's focused on the end goal. He's got his eye on the ball and he's not looking anywhere else. And it looks like he's been this way his whole life from his youth. Even as he's aged, he's kept this original nose shape. Speaking of his aging, let's look at some of his wrinkles. He's got a few notable ones here. Look at the forehead. Those creases show strong intellectual effort. He's been in deep thought for a long time and put in a lot of effort there to try and come up with these plans. It doesn't necessarily come naturally to him. It's not really intuition. It's intellectual effort. And those nasolabial folds, those laugh lines around his nose, those are signs of command ability. They mean that he is rather independent, to himself, a bit cold, but a lot of experience and natural ability with telling others what to do. Finally, he's got a nice deep crease underneath his lower lip, right above the chin there. That is a sign of a skeptical person. He's very doubtful, paranoid. I mean, knowing what Mossad does, I can't imagine what sort of counterintelligence traps and tricks he has set up to protect him. I imagine he's the sort of guy who could very much relate to the Princess Bride quote, "I always think everything is a trap, which is why I'm still alive." Now, there may be a little more to this theory of paranoia and general suspicion than just that crease there. Look at his eyelids. They're very asymmetrical. Specifically, the right eyelid droops down a ton. Now, what does this mean? Well, usually in face reading, whether it's clients or celebrities, I usually see a left eyelid drooping down, And I always tell people that that stands for someone who is shying away from something in their past or in their personal life. Maybe a shameful secret, maybe a traumatic event. It can be all sorts of things. But the right side of the face doesn't stand for the personal or private life. It stands for the public and professional life. So, logically, a droopy eyelid there would mean that he's shying away from something in his public or professional life. Now, this could be any number of things. He's had a very long, very controversial political career, but considering how long he has had that droopy right eyelid, I think that it is just a sign of general sneakiness, of him hiding his will. In general, there's a very strong asymmetry going on here. He seems to have sort of a split personality there. Let's look at the left side of his face, split up and recombined into composites to show us who Netanyahu is in his private and personal life. We can see that he doesn't have too much of a Mars face anymore. He actually has more of a Jupiter face shape. That means that he is quite religious, moralistic, more gregarious, open, friendly, and very invested in order, morality, and justice. I think he's a true believer in his cause of saving the Jewish people and protecting Israel and all that. And generally, this private Netanyahu looks rather open and gregarious. Honestly, he seems to be a pretty friendly, open guy, pretty fun to hang out with in private when there's no business involved. But look at the right side. Compare and contrast here. It's much more Martian, much more aggressive, assertive, intellectual. You see the top third of the head is way bigger than the bottom third, whereas on the left side it's the opposite. Much like what I noticed in my video on Mr. Beast, the left side, the inner self, is rather nice and friendly, but it's the right side, this external, public, and professional persona that's been built up over time, which is where the really evil traits lie. I mean, just look at this. Very sneaky, sly, clever. This is the face of a spy master, of an assassin. And this is the face and the persona that ended up getting Netanyahu into power and keeping him there. Overall, I gotta be honest, very powerful physiognomy, very harsh and sly and clever sort of look. And my last impression, my final diagnosis, is mob boss physiognomy. I mean, honestly, look at that. Whether he's Irish, Italian, Jewish, Russian, whatever, you look at that sly look in the eyes, those arched eyebrows, those big ears, big nose, and he just looks like a mob boss. He has the look of a made man, the kind of guy who just lifts his finger and another guy gets whacked. And you see how Netanyahu and his government have gotten their tentacles deep into the United States, whether it's through media, AIPAC, Mossad, other vectors, and it's very much mob tactics that they use. It's hits, it's threats, it's intimidation. And unlike some, I don't think that this is necessarily an inherent trait of Israel or of Jewish people as a whole. I think this is because Netanyahu's in charge and he has mob boss physiognomy, so he's going to run Israel like a mafia. But all in all, a powerful leader and a fierce adversary if you're up against him. Well, I hope you enjoyed this celebrity face reading of Benjamin Netanyahu. If you want to learn more about this or get a face reading done for yourself or someone you know, message me on my website. Link is in the description. This has been Taylor from Persona Insights, reminding you to always judge a book by its cover. Thank you for watching.